Hello, Coach Rick here. I'm going to begin doing a series of reading in a book called Under God by Toby Mac and Michael Tate, two great singers, spiritual singers who write these books of some really good stories from our American past that I think is going to help maybe unite us a little bit. So I'm going to start doing that, but one of the things I want to do right quick is I want to read something from one of my favorite authors, Greg Braden, who is a spiritual scientist, if you will. And I just want to read this, and then I'll go into the readings with Under God. Because I think this is important from our purely spiritual perspective in where we stand in our country and where we stand as human beings right now, and particularly with some of the things that's going on with some of the confusion about sexuality and things. So let me just read this real quick, and then we'll go on with our readings. Regarding the gender of God, while the principle of God ultimately implies both male and female, and is thus without gender, historic references suggest that it is the active male principle of God in heaven that merges with the receptive female principle of Mother Earth to produce the duality of life that is married into our bodies. For this reason, it is understood that references throughout the book that he wrote to he are references to the male principle of God in the act of creation only. I just wanted to kind of bring that kind of forward in our discussion, because a lot of what we talk about and what I do is about God and about our Creator. And one of the challenges that I want to bring just forward right now before I get into these books, before I get into the readings, is the idea about God and about the challenges that we face with the idea of God. And I just want to say this to you real quick. For those of us who think there is no God, I want you to think about where we are in the image of our Creator and where we have come in the last 20,000 years or however long we have been on this planet or longer, and where we're going and what we have done in that short amount of time that we have actually been in being, and what we may accomplish in the future if we don't wipe ourselves out first. And then ask yourself the question again, is there a God? Okay, so Under God, and I really think that we need to get a copy of this book. Everyone should get a copy of Under God by Toby Mac and Michael Tate. I'm going to do these things every day, and I'm going to let people see it publicly and use it. I have not asked permission to do this. I think that because I bought the book that I should be able to read it to people. I don't think that I'm violating anything by doing that. I'm not making any money by doing what I do with this reading. So the very first thing I'm going to read to you is the introduction. The shining light of liberty in the shadows of the dream. On July 4th, 1776, the forefathers of our nation set upon a course and forged the direction that would reverberate throughout the world and lead this nation to offer unforeseen levels of hope, prosperity, and freedom to an amazing tapestry of people. The American Revolution was truly revolutionary. Government of the people, by the people, for the people was a very radical concept. No one could have dreamed the impact it would have. In our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, one of the most profound ideals set forth was that all men are created equal. Today, it's hard to truly understand how radical the introduction of that concept was. It helps to go back to the 18th century and gain a greater understanding of what the world was like. Kings and queens were the rulers and the conquerors of the day. Justice and wealth was held in their hands. Our forefathers sought to take some of that tightly bound power and distribute it to so many who could never dream of hope and opportunity would find peace and prosperity through a freedom that was built upon the principles of God. In 1776, and for basically the next 200 years, however, for some who lived in America, this concept of all men are created equal was more authentic in word than it was in deed. Two enormous tragedies that occurred through Europe's colonization of America are found in the stories of Native Americans, or the host people, and the descendants of Africa. Slavery, the great scourge of our national history, became a gaping wound of injustice from the very outset of our nation's birth. As well as white settlers moved west in search of a better life, the Native American peoples were decimated and expelled from their lands. It is important to grasp that these two groups of people, Native Americans and blacks, did not come to America seeking the American dream. It is probably more accurate to say that they lived the American nightmare. What is often lost in all this, however, are the amazing contributions they made to this great country. Every step of the way, as our nation developed, they were right there making major contributions. While our forefathers set forth the ideal of what this nation could become, it was immensely more difficult to carry out and ensure this ideal for all men and women. It is a profound task that continues to this very day. Here is where we see the greatness of the American Revolution. A foundation that was laid that would allow for change, and this foundation could be built upon to lift this nation higher toward its grand ideal. Our forefathers cautioned, however, that if we were to lose our religion and morality, our foundation would surely crumble. This is a glimpse into the battle that started roughly 500 years ago when the first European explorers came to this land. Some have called it our dual heritage. To help give framework for examining this heritage, we can look at two of the earliest settlements, Jamestown and Plymouth. Jamestown, Virginia was a colony primarily formed as a business venture by investors to obtain wealth. In contrast, Plymouth, Massachusetts was a colony established by pilgrims primarily to further the gospel. The Protestant Reformation was a powerful force that fueled the vision of the pilgrims. If you study these two settlements in any kind of depth, you will find some interesting observations. Plymouth centered around covenanting with God and with one another. While they were not perfect by any means, over and over the pilgrims seemed to encounter divine providence at just the right times. Jamestown, on the other hand, centered primarily on the acquisition of gold and of building capital. While there were some redemptive elements in the colony, the settlers seemed to encounter much fighting and bickering and failure. Many people came to America. Many came seeking wealth. Many came seeking religious freedom. When studying the founding of the United States, one thing that you can't help but encounter is the faith of our forefathers. Time and time again, our forefathers recognized God's hand in the shaping of the nation. You will find him mentioned repeatedly in their words and documents. Amazingly, hardly any of this factual history is taught today, whereas it was common public school teaching material 75 years ago. It is important to note, though, that while our forefathers were great men who did great things, they were also just men, fallible and imperfect. When we decided to embark upon creating this book, we decided to use King David from the Bible as our model. He was a man after God's own heart, but he was also a murderer and an adulterer. And though David repented of his errors, they haunted him the rest of his life. In the same way, our forefathers left some things undone, and along the way, our nation plunged into some dark traditions. Ours is a heritage of light, and ours is a heritage of darkness. This book is a collection of short stories about our heritage. Each short story could have, and has had, entire books written about its subject. Our collection of stories is by no means exhaustive. We have left out many great ones, but it is our hope that these accounts will ignite a passion and inspire you to learn more about the great heritage you have and to seek out the unfinished work left to do. It is our hope that you enjoy reading these stories as much as we have discovering them. Toby and Michael. These guys are truly, truly patriots. And that's where I'm going to leave it right now. That we have got some great stories to read to you. And I'm going to leave you with this one little piece of information to share with you in tonight's reading. And then we'll pick up again tomorrow. Worship in the Capitol. Thanks to the constitutional mandate of Article 1, Section 5, Paragraph 3, every debate and every vote that has taken place in Congress from 1774 to the present is recorded in the public records. As a result of this mandate, the American people are able to read exactly what happened when Congress first moved into the Capitol. On December 4th, 1800, just a few weeks after moving into the building, Congress decided that the Capitol would also serve as a church building. This fact is not only recorded in the annals of Congress, but also confirmed in the journals of various representatives and senators serving at that time. For example, Senator John Quincy Adams recorded on October 30th, 1803. Attended public service at the Capitol where Mr. Rattoon, an Episcopalian clergyman from Baltimore, preached a sermon. Just a week earlier, he'd written, "Religious service is usually performed on Sundays at the Treasury Office and at the Capitol. I went both forenoon and afternoon to the Treasury." Thus began the long-standing and congressional sanctioned practice of using government buildings as houses of worship. What happened? What happened? As we embark on these readings over the next few weeks and probably months, because this is an astounding collection of works, we need to ask ourselves, what happened? Where are we? And where are we going as a country? I am not one with rose-colored glasses about what's going on in our country right now and with our people. I do want to ask you a profound question. Are you an American or are you something else? Patriotism is the golden keystone of the foundation of our unity. And without that keystone, our American dreams will crumble from within. The principles that our country was built on, our principles, is our belief in God. And one of our amendments is the right to religious freedom. It doesn't say Christianity. It doesn't say Islam. It doesn't say Judaism. It doesn't say Buddhism. It says your right to religious freedom. In our country, you have a right to practice whatever religion you want to practice. You do not have the right to force your religion on anybody, similar to what they did back in the Crusades and that kind of thing, where they were really torturing people into submission to be a certain religion. But you have a right to worship. You have a right to be in your religion without harming others. What happened? What happened to that resulted in the removal of God from our Pledge of Allegiance? What happened to the Pledge of Allegiance in our schools? We must be united as a country. The people that seem to be wanting to tear our country apart don't make sense to me at all. It just does not make sense to me at all. I don't understand what's going on with Dr. Seuss. Really, I do not. What is wrong with people with Dr. Seuss? I love Dr. Seuss, one of the most diverse, supporting writers in our history. Dr. Seuss. You cannot give me any reason to not have my grandkids and my kids and me love Dr. Seuss. Forget about it. Anyway, that's all I have for tonight. I hope that you have a wonderful night, and I will have this published and you'll be able to see it on YouTube. And I don't think I've said anything or brought anything to fore it. And I don't know. When I say Dr. Seuss, I might get banned. I just thought about that. I hope not, because I think my message is very clean and straightforward. So I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.